The lake lay still beneath a pale November sky, its surface like glass until the wind moved across it, slow, deliberate, as though the land itself were breathing. Eli Warren stood on the cracked concrete lip of the old dam, his boots leaving dusty prints on the surface his father once poured by hand. The hum of machinery echoed faintly from the far side of the ridge, not the sound of tractors or the low chug of his generator, but something foreign. Sharper. Hungrier. For 20 years, Eli had lived here alone. His father's ashes were buried under the cottonwood by the north fence, marked only by a river stone and a rusted plaque that read Warren Reservoir, 1978. The land had been theirs, 600 acres of wheat, pine, and silence. Until the surveyors came. At first, he thought it was a mistake, orange flags appearing in his meadow, men in hard hats speaking in polite tones. They told him it was public access reassignment, that the Clearwater Lakeside project had been approved months ago. Eli had laughed then, a short sound that startled even him. "You can't build here," he'd said. "That's my land." But the county records told a different story. Lines redrawn. Titles reassigned. Paperwork forged clean. The first time he met Marcus Kent, the HOA president, the man arrived in a white SUV, smiling like a salesman at the end of a good year. "Mr. Warren," Marcus said, stepping over a coil of barbed wire. "This development's going to raise property values for everyone. You should be proud your land's part of something bigger." Eli said nothing. He watched the man's polished shoes sink half an inch into the mud. That night, he walked the dam in darkness, flashlight beam trembling over the water's edge. The new home's floodlights blinked across the hill, a constellation built on theft. The air smelled like wet clay and diesel. He closed his eyes, hand resting on the cold steel valve. "Something bigger," he murmured. And for the first time in years, the quiet acres felt like they were listening back. The county office smelled of burnt coffee and paper dust. Eli stood before the clerk's counter, clutching a worn folder that once held his father's original land deeds. Now it was empty but for copies, all stamped void, revised. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes and a plastic badge, barely looked up. "I've checked every archive," Eli said quietly. "There should be files under Warren Agricultural Holdings." She shook her head. "Not anymore. The Clearwater HOA purchased that parcel last spring." Spring. The same month he'd repaired the dam's gate seals. By the time he stepped back into the parking lot, the snow had turned to rain. Water gathered along the asphalt edges, small rivers tracing the slope toward the lake. He watched it flow and thought about how easily boundaries vanished when no one remembered where they'd begun. Days turned into weeks of letters, appeals, and silence. Marcus's lawyers replied with perfect grammar and no empathy. All transfers were approved through proper channels. It was a machine, polished and untouchable. Then one evening, as Eli left another meeting in defeat, a voice stopped him near the elevator. "You're wasting your time with them." A woman stepped from the shadows, coat collar up, eyes darting toward the hallway cameras. "I shouldn't be talking to you," she whispered. "My name's Claire. I work for the HOA." He studied her, early 30s, careful voice, trembling hands. She glanced around again, then slid him a folded printout. They changed the maps. The alteration didn't come from Marcus. It came from inside the county zoning office. Someone was paid off. "Who?" She hesitated. "You don't want to know." After she left, Eli drove home in silence, the paper glowing faintly on the seat beside him. He placed it on his kitchen table under a jar of lake water, watching the ink blur slowly through the glass. From that night on, he began keeping notes, rainfall logs, pressure readings, water levels against the dam wall. His handwriting grew tighter, neater, mechanical. "They built on water," he murmured to himself one dawn, standing by the roaring spillway. "They built on water." And somewhere above the ridge, the hammering of new homes never stopped. Rain had been falling for 3 days straight, thin and relentless. The lake swelled against its concrete edges, the dam groaning faintly like something alive beneath the strain. Eli stood under the shed's tin roof, watching the water rise inch by inch. He hadn't seen Claire in a week, not since she'd promised to bring proof, the original survey documents. When her car finally appeared through the mist, his pulse quickened like the gauge needle on his monitor. She stepped out, soaked, clutching a folder to her chest. "I shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was low, urgent. "You already are," Eli replied, moving closer. "What did you find?" Inside the house, the wood stove hissed. She laid the papers out across his table, hands shaking. "Marcus blackmailed me," she whispered. "He said if I didn't sign off on the zoning revisions, he'd tell the board about my loan, how I falsified my income to keep my mother's house." Eli stared at her, the words hitting harder than any legal notice. "So you helped them steal it?" Tears filled her eyes. "I thought it was just paperwork, Eli. I didn't know they were taking your land." He turned away, fingers digging into the edge of the counter. The kettle began to whistle, high and sharp, matching the sound in his head. "Everyone takes what they can," Claire said softly, echoing Marcus's creed. "You just didn't." Something in him cracked. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "You think this is about taking," he said. "No. This is about returning." Later, when the rain stopped, he led her down to the dam. The moon hung over the swollen lake, pale and cold. Water trickled from a seam in the wall, whispering against the stone. "This tunnel," he said, touching the rusted hatch, "was built for overflow control. My father said you never open it unless you're ready for what comes out." Claire's breath trembled. "Eli, don't." But he had already turned the wheel, just enough for a low hiss of air to escape. He closed his eyes and whispered, "You took what's mine. I'll take what's yours." The sound of water moving beneath them was almost tender. The storm arrived before midnight, black clouds rolling over the ridge like smoke, thunder splitting the silence that had hung for weeks. Eli's pickup growled up the gravel road, headlights carving through sheets of rain. Below him, the 35 new homes shimmered with light, glass, marble, and manicured lawns glistening under lightning. His land, stripped and renamed Clearwater Estates. The wipers fought against the downpour, squealing with each pass. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him, Claire's name glowing through the dark. He didn't answer. It went to voicemail. Her voice trembled through the static. "Eli, please. I told the board everything. I gave the county the real documents. Marcus is done. You don't have to do this. I'm leaving tonight." She paused, breath-catching. "I'm pregnant, Eli. I was going to tell you after the storm." He shut his eyes, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles blanched. The dam appeared ahead, ghostly in the rain, the same steel hatch, the same whispering valves, now roaring beneath the pressure. Lightning flashed, turning the world silver. He stepped out into the storm. The air smelled of wet earth and metal. Water surged over the spillway, slamming against the concrete like fists. He walked to the control gate, hands trembling, rain soaking through his jacket. For a moment, he saw his father's face, calm, stern, standing beside him on a summer day, saying, "You control the water, or it controls you." Eli turned the wheel. Slowly, deliberately. The lock snapped. The sound that followed wasn't thunder, it was the earth exhaling. Below, the lights of Clearwater flickered, then vanished as the surge swallowed them whole. By dawn, the lake was calm again. Eli sat in his pickup, half submerged, the phone still playing the end of Claire's message, a whisper, faint and broken, "Come back." Red and blue lights shimmered across the water. He looked at the reflection, at what was left of the valley, and smiled faintly. "Now it's mine again," he said.